Great. So welcome again, everybody, and to those who are joining. We're going to move on from the recording disclaimer, and Chris and myself we've sort of introduced ourselves already, so we can skip that slide, and we can go into the first part of what we were going to look at in terms of Slack, and that's the theme for this evening. We're going to be talking all Slack in a variety of different means. So what we thought we would do initially was have a bit of an open discussion about how we are using Slack. So let me just stop sharing the screen for this at this point, because then we could actually have a bit of a conversation and I can actually see people as well. So Slack's a bit of a fun beast. I quite enjoy Slack, but I thought it'd be good just to kind of start off a bit of a general discussion to see how people are using Slack. So out of curiosity, does anybody use Slack?
Nope.
Yeah, and I moved from my old job with Teams to this one with Slack, and it is the way we all communicate. So yeah, it is a great environment, isn't it? It's better than Teams, I think, anyway.
So would you say that you guys are embracing the idea of sort of like the, digital HQ, or like moving away from email and into Slack? Or would you say you guys are doing like sort of a blend?
It's a blend, I think. You get the notifications of customer responses in email, but Slack's where everyone goes all the swarming and then day-to-day communication between the team. It's all on there.
Okay. And then do you guys have you make use of like external channels where you guys are communicating to partners via the platform, or is it, you'd say, like, I don't know, are you guys breaking it up differently, like or would you say the majority of your communication to external partners and clients happens in email?
I wouldn't know about this, but in Financial Force, because I'm a support, but I think possibly that the CSMs and the salespeople do that. But there's a facility to do that, I suppose, isn't there, with the platform? But I wouldn't know. Sorry.
Yeah, I wondered what level, because I think there's like some companies that have gone kind of all in, where they're just like, yep, Slack's it, like Slack's our platform. I saw a guy on LinkedIn today posted something. Well, he's at Salesforce itself, so but he had said something about being on staff for 6 months now, and he'd sent something like 6 emails in the entirety of his time there, but everything else had been through Slack, including with external partners. So obviously that's like kind of the like cutting edge far end of it, I think, which makes sense from Salesforce.
I just did the trailhead for Slack in Salesforce, and it's like, it says how marketers can like reach out to customers and get them to do surveys and then feed that to the product team, etc. So it can be like a fully interactive exchange of both client and agent in the same area, which is really good, I think. But I'll never get to use it, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll go over some of that functionality today, but I think that there are definitely companies out there that are pushing the limits of what's possible. I worked at a marketing agency in the past, and I know that we made really big use of the ability for us to communicate with clients in external channels. So I know in some of the modules they talk about within marketing having certain things being approved, let's say, like whether it was like marketing copy or creative, that could be done via Slack. And then the nice thing for all of the internal team, our internal team, was that all the communication was there. So all you had to do was like pull it up, and they'd be like, well, why do we run this? And it's like, well, remember, like you guys stated that this was what you wanted, this was approved, here was the, and you could just point to it in channel where everyone had access to it, which made it easy. Anyone else using Slack that wants to tell us a little bit about how they're making use of it? Suzanne, I know you just joined.
I can speak to that. I mean, we're using Slack. We've been using it for a long while, but prior to the the acquisition by Salesforce. Yeah, it's interesting that the organization loves Slack for collaboration and, you know, some degree socializing and other things, but we're not quite there on fully integrating it with Salesforce and a full digital kind of HQ use. Seems to be a lot of love for emails for some reason, where we are. So I personally would love to kind of move the needle on that and get us a bit more digital HQ, a bit more instant and interactive, and yeah, not have stuff going out through email servers. But I don't know, there's I don't know, stakeholders and staff that love it that way. I don't know if it's maybe just a fear of change. They don't quite know what could be achieved through the other alternative as well. Yeah, that's what we are.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, it's a technology platform, right? So for anybody who's not used to adapting their ways of working to, you know, new technologies rather quickly. And as well, I think, I don't know, there's, in addition to like the sort of like business as usual reluctance that happens in any digital transformation, you're talking about like something that, you know, is embedded in everyday life. Like how many of us don't have to have, you know, 5 different oh, sorry, Mark. How many of us have to, you know, be on the lookout? Oh, sorry, I'm just a little distracted. But, you know, like you have, I don't know, I personally have like Gmail, multiple Gmail accounts. I've got like a Proton Mail account. I've got, you know, like probably like 7 or 8 legacy email accounts that I've abandoned that have like a million spam emails in them from like hotmail.com or one of those old domains. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's like probably just a huge reluctance to move in that direction if you don't know what's possible, right? So Becky, I think you were maybe had
yeah, so we don't use Slack where I work. We use Teams, but what for me is new about sort of working in, you know, the Salesforce space as opposed to when I used to work in civil engineering for a long time is that we used to use Teams almost more socially, and the formal communication went through emails. And I quite like that, to be honest. Like I find it, now that we use Teams for everything, I find I want that. Sometimes I want to send something more formal or something that feels more, I don't know, I could set it out more like a letter. I don't know, a bit more contractual. Sometimes the more conversational platforms, they feel a bit chatty, and it feels like it's not always appropriate for everything. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how there's maybe like a gravitas that's missing from the Slack platform because you're using it like in a really conversational way and like using emojis to react to things.
Yeah, I think for me it blurs the boundaries when sometimes I want the boundaries back in.
Fair enough. That's interesting. Sorry, Cher, I think I spoke over you.
Oh, it's okay. It's no worries. What I was going to say is I kind of, because I'm not using it for work, I'm using it for projects. And the benefit for me is that a lot of my teammates are located all over. So it's either the UK, the US, Canada, on all different time zones as well. And I find that it feels less intrusive to use Slack because I get to know what time it is in their, you know, wherever they are. So for me, I've created some Slack channels just to keep in touch with my team. And that's how I've used it. But this is just, I mean, it's really great to be able to go back and forth with the team, and especially being able to drop documents in there as well. You know, oh, hey guys, what do you think of this design? And just get a quick response. So, so that's how I've been using it.
Yeah, I like that it supports that sort of like asynchronous working pattern, where, like you say, kind of everyone can update everyone on what their working hours are, and And I think that that's, yeah, like a huge benefit to using it. I know that there are other competing platforms like Loom, for example, that have some of the same capabilities. But yeah, when you're working across, time zones and boundaries, and that can be really helpful. I know for me, like, we use both Slack and email, and I actually find it incredibly frustrating. And we use Teams. I find it really frustrating because I feel like I'm constantly looking in all of the platforms for information, in addition to obviously Salesforce. But like, I have teammates who have obvious preferences, and want to be instant message via the Teams platform. And equally, we work with clients externally, and they want stuff sent, like generated through their own platforms and stuff. So I find that I waste a lot of time in the day looking for information. And I wish that I just had sort of one central repository, whether that was like Slack or another platform. But I do think Slack has a lot of potential in that regard. So would be interested to explore it, I guess. Anyone else want to share, even in the chat, if you don't want to, participate while we're recording, or come onto camera, but would love to hear about how anyone's using Slack, or even, just your experience with Slack, whether personally or, even if you've just gone on and done a few trails or badges related to it. Would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, so we've kind of dropped off from using Slack, or at least I've certainly dropped off from using Slack. There's been a great big push to go onto Teams. I don't know particularly why that is. I think it integrates well with SharePoint and all of the other online tools that we've got, which is helpful. There was a period where we were running a project and half the people were using Teams and half the people were using Slack, and it was just impossible, and I hated it. I think I've got quite a personal dislike of Slack, and my dislike of it is because it ties in with my experience of working with the sort of developer that is very gatekeepery about developer skills, and me being of the female persuasion, I can feel quite excluded from those groups of people, even though I'm perfectly good developer. Thank you very much. But yeah, it just never felt very comfortable with it, whereas I feel like Teams is a bit more friendly. And I don't know if that's insane. Probably is. But that's just the way that I feel. I've always felt a little bit excluded by Slack. And I'm quite glad that we don't use it anymore. However, I'm here to have my mind changed. Persuade me. I mean, not that I can do anything. It's our strategic direction is that we're using Teams. But, still, convince me otherwise.
Well, I'm really interested to kind of unpack what you just said there, because I feel like the whole point of Slack, right, is to have these open channels that create transparency so that everybody knows, that everyone's on the same page, right? Or at least that's the premise. But you mentioned, feeling excluded. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what that experience was like for you, or were there any specifics? Did you feel like conversations were happening, maybe elsewhere without you? Or
yeah, I mean, some of it is just that I wasn't added into the channels. And so I didn't know they were going on. And that's not Slack's fault. But it was happening on Slack. And I think perhaps it's to do with the sorts of people that will run Teams versus the sort of so I guess what the question I'm asking is it purely my perception that Slack is more of a nerdy developer thing, or is that actually a thing that other people think as well?
I've got a bit of an answer to that from my experience. So where I work, Slack was brought in because the developers wanted it, because our engineers wanted it, because it links to GitHub, because it can be coded to do all sorts of stuff. So in my organization, Slack started as a engineering department developers fancy new tool thing. So they owned it, or they were the champions for it.
Mhm.
And then it got rolled out across other departments, and other roles started using it in a more kind of conversational way. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I think I see a grain of similarity in what you're saying
Mhm.
to where we are, in that it was this trendy, new, massively interconnectable, programmable tool, and engineers and developers loved it. And I wonder if, unfortunately, maybe it sounds like it turned into a bit of a, you know, gatekeeping thing wherever you were. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
other
and
people
that's
to our fancy new techie tool.
and that's definitely not Slack's fault. But it sounds like it does a whole load of really cool techie stuff, which makes it really, really useful. And maybe the fluffy teams, which definitely doesn't do those things, is less cool for the people that like that sort of thing. So maybe it's not necessarily a drawback, but it is something to watch out for.
Yeah, well, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like cultural or something, or maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't I want to say policed well, but like that's
Yeah.
kind of the you know, what comes to mind, right? Because at
But
my
we have to learn etiquette for
yeah,
any platform that we use. And we've all grown up with email. Some of us didn't grow up with email, but we got to it fairly young-ish. I was definitely an adult when I got my first email account. But you know, I all of my working life I've had email. Then messaging and chat came in a bit later for me. But we're still working out how to do it in a professional setting. So this is a very non-technical discussion of these platforms.
yeah, well, I think we're just trying to get at like one, you know, what's people's level of comfortability with the platform in general, like have you used it, you know, and in what ways, but also like, you know, what do we want to get out of today's discussion? Like we'll talk about stuff and we'll give you resources, but you know, like I'm interested in hearing, you know, what's gonna be useful for people. And even if we don't cover it today, because we can't, or because we're not at that level of expertise, you know, maybe we could get somebody who's an expert who could show us like even fancier stuff. Like I know that I reviewed some of the videos from, so Slack's version of Dreamforce is called Slack Frontiers. And there are companies doing really cool, you know, what are essentially workflows, so flows of data in and out of the system that are, you know, whether they're updating them for, you know, daily stand-ups or whether they're, you know, pulling data that's like timely out of, you know, systems for like just-in-time analysis. It does have a ton of capability, but, you know, if nobody in our group is using it that way and nobody is bothered about it, then let's just go over some of the basics and how you can learn more about it, you know? Anyone else? I know, Phil, you were maybe a little late to the conversation, but basically we were just having an overview of how people are using the platform and how and whether they're familiar with it.
Yeah, sorry, I am jumping in a bit late. In terms of Slack, I used it at a client. I mean, personally, I like the product. I use it personally. So I've got things like my home servers connected up to it. So I do find it easier when it comes to integrating other things to it. So you can embed it more in business processes for clients and things. The problem is, even internally, is that we use things like Teams because Microsoft seems to be the kind of enterprise norm. But yeah, I would like to use Slack more. I think the challenge that I've seen and had a conversation with a couple of clients is getting the right message across as to where it's useful. Because they say, well, we've got Chatter. It's like, yeah, but that depends what they're trying to do with it. So it gives other options for external parties and integration to other applications outside of Salesforce. But yeah, I like it. I like the tool. I'm interested to find out a lot more about it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like any other platform where you sort of like need going back to Susanna's point, right? About how, like, who's the champion for the platform, who's the person, and how, how are they touting its capabilities, because it can be a little bit insular, right? Where you're creating private channels
Absolutely.
or direct messages.
Yeah.
And, but I think any instant messaging platform can be that way. Whereas if you have somebody who's like, really excited about, like, at the marketing agency that I worked at previously, there were only about 50 of us on staff. Well, about 100 actually, in the end. But, they have very specific onboarding processes tied to how and when to use Slack, so you from the jump got a real understanding of how your team was using it, how we were using it with clients, the ways in which you were using it to get information. All of our company announcements went through it. So fundamentally it was like a huge part of all of our business processes, all of our operations processes, but without having a lot of like review of videos and here's how to do it, and coming in as a new joiner, it would have been tremendously difficult, I think, to like move everybody onto it.
Yeah, I mean, that probably would have succeeded with several tools. So as with any implementation, having someone to champion it, having people using it regularly, having a clear process of when to use it is all going to make that adoption a success. But I think the challenge is making Slack stand out from other applications, and how it's going to advance coming forward as it gets closer into the Salesforce party.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, I think, like you say, to see how they're embracing addressing some of those challenges, I think. Any other thoughts from anyone? I do want to acknowledge, that it's an open forum. So if anybody has anything, again, whether they want to just talk about it or pop it in the chat. Otherwise, I think we'll move on because we have a bit of stuff that we want to, I know Mark's chomping at the bit. He's excited to show you guys some of the cool stuff that he's built. All right, Mark, you want to take it away then?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have a bit of a demo that we're going to show off. However, first we do have a smaller section that we're going to highlight first, which is some common questions. And these are ones that have been kind of put out by the community. And so these are some the questions that will come up regularly around Slack and Salesforce. So we're going to begin with the first one. I was meant to do that a bit earlier and I forgot to do it. I was going to try and do a fully forward-looking statement side and totally forgot to do that today because I got sidetracked with work, which is a good thing. But basically, just to put a caveat on anything that I say here or anything that get shipped in, I obviously don't work for Salesforce, so I do not have the inside track on this. This is basically stuff that is based on either my knowledge or what I think might happen. So just to bear that in mind, when I say I think things might happen, it doesn't mean that I'm right on this front. I could be completely wrong.
Mark is saying don't make any purchasing decisions based on any obviously false forward-looking statement.
Exactly. Yep, that's my forward-looking statement. I don't work for Salesforce, so this is all guesses. So like the first question that often comes up is, will Slack eventually replace Chatter? This one, in my honest opinion, is going to be, I think it will at some point. However, I have no idea as to when that would be. Like I said, I do think it will happen at some point. I think that's what Salesforce are trying to build up towards with Slack Actions, particularly try and get it to be a replacement for Chatter eventually. The thing I would say on this is that don't be surprised if it comes sooner than you think. And what I mean by that is I'm going to pick up on Flow as the analogy here, because this is what I often compare it to. So a couple of years ago, Salesforce did a massive load of work on Flow and brought out like a massive set of updates, and that set of updates got the community talking, going, oh, so is Salesforce going to retire Workflow Rules and Process Builder? And lots of people in the community said, it looks like they're going to, but it's going to be at least 5 to 6 years away before we even get an announcement that this is going to happen. Lo and behold, 11 months later, we got an announcement that Workflow Rules and Process Builder were going to be retiring. So that's kind of my logic for kind of thinking this might happen sooner than we think. There's been a lot of good progress with Slack Actions, but while I can't guarantee a time, I wouldn't be surprised if we get something within the next year or so. Some kind of announcement say, look, we are going to be shifting over here, and here's a approximate plan. But that's that question. The next question that we got was, can you post notifications in Slack via Salesforce? I'm not going to spend too much time on this question because you are going to get to see a bit of this in action. And the short answer to this is yes, you can post. Now, when people see notifications, I would be interpreting that as Slack messages, as what I would interpret that question to generally be. But you can post Slack messages into Slack via Salesforce, and we will be demoing that shortly. Next one is, can Slack conversations be tagged in Salesforce? The short answer to this one is not right now as such, or it's a bit of a yes and a no. So what you can do with Slack Actions, and you'll be able to see this again in the demo in a little bit, when you post a message in Slack via Salesforce, you can output the timestamp for the message. What you can't do, though, is you can't output the conversation ID. So it's a bit of a yes and a no. But it does, however, it makes it a bit more difficult to use the edit message action, for example, because that requires a conversation ID. But because we can't output conversation IDs, and conversation IDs are surprisingly difficult to get without using some developer or API-based method, it's a bit more of a challenge at the moment. I think it might be coming at some point, but it's not currently available yet. The next question is Slack access versus Salesforce access. What's the difference? So depending on your level of Slack workspace, there are different user tiers that you have. The main base 3, which is available in all of the plans, are workspace owner, admin, and a full member. That's your base level ones. There is other ones for paid plans. I don't have a list of them here at the moment, but there are other options that you can have in terms of that. The main difference within this is that, for example, if you wanted to use Salesforce to invite somebody to a channel, they would have to be already connected to Slack, and you can't, and it's not like a joint process. It's a Salesforce for Slack is a Slack application, so you would have to create the users inside of Slack first before you can use Salesforce to invite them to the channel. So they are two different users. They're not like a case of having the same user in both. They're technically two separate users. The next question is, will Slack get an upgraded UI now that Salesforce own it? Over the last year or so, there has been some minimal changes to the UI since Salesforce took it on. There will probably end up being more that come, but in my gut, I think Salesforce will probably want to try and keep to the base Slack UI that we have at the moment, and the changes would not be so great that it'll be a completely different UI. You'll get some enhancements, but I think the UI that you have now in Slack, for those who've seen it, will be the same as what we have at the moment, for the most part. And the final question, just for a little bit of fun, is who or what will the Slack mascot be? Honestly, I have absolutely no idea on this. However, I do quite, for some reason, the whole idea stuck in my head of going, okay, the Slack mascot should be a sloth. Don't ask me why. I just think a sloth for some reason fits with Slack. I don't know why.
You might be onto something there.
But yeah, so I have no idea what the mascot's going to be, but I like the idea of a sloth.
A robot sloth, a Slack sloth bot.
A sloth bot.
Oh.
Yeah, Slack sloth bot. I do like that. Cool. So that's the main questions that have come up so far in the community around Slack. But as we move into kind of actually seeing a bit of it in action, I'm going to give you basically here in this session, you're going to actually get to see essentially the session that I delivered at PakDreamin in a bit more of a slightly quicker format. And I'm also delivering this same session over in North Africa Dreamin in October as well. So you're going to get to see a bit of that knocking around. But just to kind of set some context for it, I guess most people probably already know most of this as well anyway. But for those who don't know, and also this might benefit anybody watching the recording who doesn't know as well. Salesforce bought Slack back in 2020. To this day, it's still the biggest acquisition that Salesforce have ever made. And the acquisition was completed in 2021. Slack actions, what we're going to see in this session, are currently in beta. And they launched in the summer 22 release. They've got some decent updates in the winter 23 release that's coming up September, October time, but it's still in beta. To use the Slack and Salesforce connection, this has to be set up via an approved connection, which is, as I mentioned, for an application called Salesforce for Slack. And you can set this up in setup by going to initial Slack setup, and you can pull that in from there. Most of the actions, as you'll see, require channel ID, and this channel ID can be stored in Salesforce, which you'll see very shortly as we kind of go through the demos. And then just a quick couple of notes on there, and I'm going to mention a couple of things on the slides as well. So I've already mentioned about conversation IDs can't be outputted yet. However, timestamps can. Mention here actions in record triggered flows. If you use a flow to say create a channel or send a message or something, if you do it via record triggered flow, those Slack actions must be stored in a scheduled path. And you will get to see an example of that in the demos as well. Quick couple other things just to highlight as well, just so you're aware. If you're using the post message Slack message action, it only comes in plain text at the moment. It doesn't output as HTML. However, in testing, as I've done, if you include a URL in there and you just paste the full URL for whatever it is, it will render an HTML inside of Slack. But the Slack message, if you try to output, say, a rich text using a rich text component through, say, unofficial SF, they'll output it as plain text. And that was the main note I had on that before we mentioned conversation IDs. Okay, so in terms of the demo you're going to see, I've been building an app which I'm having a bit of fun with. I'm actually quite enjoying building this on the side as a hobby. But it's called, the app I've got is called Slack Manager, and at the moment includes 2 custom objects, which is Slack channels and Slack channel members. Slack channel members is a junction object between the Slack channel record and the user record at the moment. I will be possibly looking at how we do that, in how I build that out for contacts as well. Because, you know, for when you do, say, like using contacts for like Slack Connect, for example, you wouldn't be having them necessarily as a user inside of Salesforce. So I'm going to be having a review of seeing how that can be done. The Slack, you know, the solution, it's integrated via Slack for Salesforce, which you'll see, and it contains a bunch of flows, but the 5 main flows around it are around making a creation decision. So this is essentially just a mini approval without using approval processes, which then will fire off the creation of a channel. And there's the Slack channel member flow, which is adds a channel member to a channel upon creation of that record. There's a one for creating a message. There is a screen flow, which we're going to launch inside of Slack, which allows you to work through any open tasks that you have associated with that channel. And then there's the one for the archive channel. So we're going to see those flows in action. And the solution demos 6 Slack actions. There is some extra ones in there, as I've mentioned before, like the edit message ones in there. Edit message Slack action is available, but I haven't fully gotten that to work for reasons like I mentioned before, with the conversation ID has been hard to get hold of. But this solution is going to demo 6 actions. Those actions are create a Slack channel, check if a user is connected to Slack, invite user to Slack channel, send a Slack message, launch a screen flow in Slack, and then archive the Slack channel. So those are the 6 actions that we're going to see. I have my maths right. So with that being said, let me stop sharing my screen very briefly. And I am going to switch over to share my desktop so that you can actually see it's in a bit more practice. So you can see here, I'm inside of Slack here, and I'm going to just shift things around a little bit so I can actually hop onto here. And this is my Slack Manager app. Just to check, Chris, can you see the desktop screen okay?
Yep, I can.
Great.
Yeah, it looks good.
Cheers, thank you. So I'm going to shift this down here. So as you can see here, we've got a custom object called Slack channels. But before we actually do anything with this, I'm going to show you some of the flows around. So you can see here, I've got a bunch of flows along my tabs here, and it will kind of show you what's going on in these flows. So this is the make the creation decision flow. And all this is a screen flow that'll run. If the channel is approved, it'll send you onto the next stage, which is to create the channel. And here's the first example of a Slack action. So what you'll see here, when you create any Slack action inside a flow, you'll get the same kind of things that pop up. So you'll get the Slack app, which you can click on the list, and it'll give you a list, either your Slack app that is connected, or you can do it via a resource. I haven't got the resource side to work yet, though, in full transparency. You can also do the same with select the workspace that is connected via the Slack app, and you can choose to execute the action as either the Slack app or the user who runs the flow in user context. We're going to be doing all of these as the Slack app because, again, in transparency, I haven't gotten the user who runs the flow in user context to quite work yet. That's something I'm hoping to try and get sorted out in the relatively not too distant future, because one of the things I would love to see is, for example, on the send the message action, for it to actually appear, the message to appear as if it's coming from the user in question rather than the Slack app. As I mentioned before, most of the Slack actions will ask for a channel, and we've gotten this from the channel API. API name is how this is for the creation channel. So I create a channel using this formula, and then the channel type will be public. Then what will happen here, if we go to the advanced and we do the assigned variables, we can output the Slack channel ID, and we're putting that into the record that fires the flow. And after this, what you see here is just a couple of extra bits. I'm going to assign some extra values to the record. So I'm going to say the channel was created on the current date and time, and the status is active. We then just update the record with just popping it with everything that we assign within the flow to the record. And after that, you get a confirmation notice to say, congratulations, you've created this Slack channel. So that's the first flow. The second flow, which is the record triggered flow, is the one about adding members to channels. So what I'll do is I'll set the collection variable for the user ID in here, which will be the user. You can see there, record ID, record user, and it'll then open the subflow, which is where it adds a channel member, and it populates the channel ID and then the user ID, and that takes us into the invite user the channel flow. And we've got here again another Slack action, which is to check if the user is connected. Again, you'll see some of the things coming through. So you've got the var user ID. This is a point just to mention as well. The user ID side in this, it's a collection. So basically, if you were to say create multiple records, this would be able to allow it to be bulkified in some ways. But you can also just say have a slightly different approach where you could say maybe run a scheduled triggered flow, for example, and just invite any user who is not connected into it and check who's connected or not. In the outputs, we've got two different ones in here. We've got ones, and this is the kind of way I'd possibly recommend doing this for if you were to have multiple users inside of the flow for this, the user IDs. So you'd have a collection of user IDs that aren't connected to Slack, so that are connected, and then a collection of IDs that aren't connected to Slack. And then what this flow will then do is it'll just quickly check, are they connected? And if just say, is the user connected? Null, is not null. And if it's not null, it'll move on to the next stage, which is this Slack action here, which is invite users to Slack channel. So you can see here again, the Slack app and the Slack workspace and who to execute the action as, what the channel ID is, what the Slack workspace ID is for the channel, and what collection are we using. So we're using the connected users collection for that. So that's the invite user to Slack one. The thing I will note here, and you'll see this as when we go through the demo of actually creating a Slack channel, inviting and adding users to it. With this being part of a record trigger flow, there is a slight lag that will happen in between. And it can take a few seconds for the user to get connected. The next one is the send a message one. And I've got a couple of different ways that we can do this in this solution, in this org that I've got with the Slack Manager app. I've got a component on the navigation page, which is called quick message, which basically pops up a screen flow which will ask you to select the Slack channel and then to send, and then it'll give you a screen to populate the Slack message. But in this, what I'm showing you here is we are doing essentially, this is the one from the quick action that I've got on the record. So I've got a quick action button on the Slack channel record, which says send a message. And what this will do, this will populate an ID into there and the Slack channel ID. And it'll open up a different component. And the reason I've done this one, in this particular way, is so that I can have the template flow, which is the Slack channel message flow, basically pop up. I can have that essentially anywhere, as long as I have it connected to as a subflow to another flow that is the trigger. And afterwards, I've got an unofficial SF component, which I've installed into the solution, which is navigate to record. And I'll just take you back to the record page, and I'll give you take you back to it in the view mode. And this is the creating the message one. And what you've got here is just a screen with a long text area where you can type your message. Again, but this will port out as plain text. And then you've got your Slack message action, which will then again uses the Slack channel ID. Again, as I say, it is meant to accept conversation IDs, but I have not found a way as of yet to get the conversation IDs properly. And it'll give you here the Slack message as well, and then the record ID. And this is used to link it to records inside of Slack. If I go down here, you can see if I go to the manual assigned variables, you can see that I can output the timestamp, but not the conversation ID. Last few ones just to show you. This is one that will be updating in this session here, so we can actually fire the screen flow inside of Slack. And this is just an action which will fire the screen flow. And what this does is this gives you as a message inside of there when this launches, and it'll launch a screen flow. And you can see there's some other bits now we want to do if we want to include, say, like a timestamp as an input or bot name as an input as well. And the input values for here is the record ID and the user ID. And in terms of the manual variables for this, it's the timestamp again. That's two ones briefly. So this is the archive channel. So what this will do here is it'll just do a quick get. It'll get the values of the record, and it'll launch the archive of the subflow, which will populate the record ID and the Slack channel ID. And then it goes into the subflow, which is here, which will then archive the channel. And we can see here we've populated via the Slack channel ID. And then update, set some variables to update, which is when it was archived, the status now equals archived, and the Slack channel equals the record ID. We'll then update the record, which is the record Slack channel variable. And then again, the same unofficial SF action will take us back to the Slack channel at the end. Okay, so that's the flows that we're using in this. And if I pop over here, you will see here as well, we've got this component here, quick message as well. But let's actually now start demoing Slack in action, these Slack actions in action. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up my screens so that you can now see Slack and Salesforce running side by side. This does change the display a little bit, but you'll see the Slack actions running side by side. So I'm going to create a new channel. I'm going to call this and give this an event, and we're going to call this Salesforce user group new cat, and then call it the August Meetup. Okay. These two fields of what are edible to me as a system admin. I'm not going to touch these because these are populated via the flow. And I'm going to give this channel a quick description, which is a Slack channel for the Newcastle July meetup. I'm going to click on save. And what you'll see here is you can see that the channel's been created. And if I scroll down and ignore the work guide, because that is something else I'm working on related to this, you'll see here we've got the screen flow, which is to say that we approve of the channel being created. So I'm going to make that decision. And we can see there that it's been approved. And if I go to my Slack here and just go to all channels, you'll see here we've got the channel here already, but we're not added to it yet because nobody's been added yet. So I'm going to go back to general for now. I'm going to now add myself as a Slack channel member. Just click on the channel. I'm going to save that, and we'll give that a second or two. So that'll run. What we're going to do in the meantime is we're going to create a task. Just use that for the activities, and actually, because it's going a little bit quicker than anticipated, we can see here that I've been added to the Slack channel. Now we're going to create a task. So I'm going to just call this archive channel. We'll give this a due date of today, and we're going to leave that as it is, because this is what the screenflow is connected to. So you can see here, I've got a task here. And what we're going to do next, we're going to send a message from the quick action. So we're going to go say, send a message, just call it hello world. And you can see there, it's popped in the message from there. Just to demo it as well, I'm going to do a quick action on here. And I'm going to refresh this page. See if this will work. There we go. So I'm now going to, this is my navigation version of it. So I'm going to just select the August Meetup channel, and I'm going to go say message 2, log that, and you can see there it's come up on there. And so we've got those ones sorted out and working. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to my fire the task update, and I am going to very briefly, I'm going to just activate, just maximize this very briefly. So I'm going to edit this section here. I'm going to give this to today, and we're going to give that as an 1853. Done. Save, activate. And now we're going to change this back on my screen to the left, because what will happen here in about 30 seconds or so is we'll get a message here that'll pop up inside of this channel asking us to launch a ScreenFlow. And when that does, it'll work, and you can see there. I'm not sure why this has come through twice. This is something I need to work through. So it's happened twice on this channel. But what we can do is we can click on the launch flow button. And you can see here, this is my ScreenFlow that I've built. So I'm going to select the open task for archive. So I'm going to select that. And I'm going to change this to in progress for this example. I'm going to click on confirm changes. And at the end of this flow, because I want to give us an option to update other tasks as well, I'm going to click on close this flow for now, just so we can show that works. And it's got the your flow finished, which I'm not a big fan of, but for now that's probably the best way at the moment. So I'm going to click on close, and I'm going to scroll down to my task. I'm going to open that in a new tab, so you can see that. And if you look at that, it's now, you can see there it's updated to in progress, and the description has the in progress comment over here. I'm going to launch this again, because I'll just show you how it works in full working order. So I'm going to go to the archive channel task. We're going to just say completed and channel archived. I'm going to click on confirm changes. And rather than closing the flow this time, I'm going to click on update another task to show you the safeguard I put in there, which will basically say if there's no open tasks found against the channel, that you can't actually do anything and the flow will have to close. So I'm going to click on confirm the next step choice, and we can see here there's no open tasks currently assigned to me in this channel. So the process can only be carried out if I have open tasks. So I'm now going to close that flow, and that's that done. And if I refresh the page, we'll see here that the task is completed. Now, if I go back to my channel and I show the last action, I'm going to click on the archive channel. And you can see there, if I go to my Slack bot message over here, the channel has been archived, which is fantastic. And if I refresh this page, we can see there that the channel's been archived, and we've got the date archived at that time. So that's Slack messages, Slack actions overall. As I say, there's a few different ones that are available in there, such as to join a channel. I personally don't know if I would actually use that one, mainly because I would want to ensure that the user's connected to Slack first. So I would probably always go down the route of check if they're connected to Slack and then invite them to the channel. I think that's just a better process for that, in regards to that. What we could do for the, you could use the join channel as a quick fire one if you wanted to. And then, as I say, the edit message one is not one I've gotten to work yet either. But that's an overview of Slack actions, and what we can do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just say, is there any questions that anybody has? I know I've done that as a bit of a whistle stop.
Is there an action to trigger a workflow in Slack?
As in the trigger like a screen flow workflow builder? Is that what you mean? Or
no, Slack's got a concept of workflows that can be triggered by various means. I was just wondering if you could trigger one of those from Salesforce.
So not at the moment, no. An alternatively as well, like workflow builder is the methodology for creating workflows in Slack. The thing I have looked at as well, and that same kind of thing, is actually triggering the screen flow via workflow builder as well, and that's not available at the moment either.
What about other entry points for Slack apps, like commands or shortcuts?
Yeah, so the only command at the moment for the Salesforce for Slack integration is to check is the connector user to it. That's the only one that's available at the precise moment. I would like to see more come, particularly once, say, if I want to say again use like a screen flow, I'd like to be able to trigger that via a slash command, for example, rather than just have, say, like a screen flow populated in like either a scheduled trigger flow like I did there, or to do it via record triggered automation. I'd like to be able to just manually trigger that in Slack via a slash command. Is there any other questions that we have? Again, this is all this is all relatively new as well. It's like it's only been available since the summer release, so May, June time, and there is some changes coming. So the changes are coming, actually, probably worth pointing out. So in ScreenFlow and Slack, at the moment, if you use it without a Winter 23 preview org, which is what I was on there, you can only do pick lists and radio buttons inside of ScreenFlow and Slack, and you can't input, and you don't have the ability to use any input variables either. However, in the Winter 23 release, not only are you going to get input variables, you're going to get additional things such as long text area as well, checkboxes, date. I think date times in there as well, and I think those are the main fields that's coming from text, date, time, checkbox, long text area. They're coming in into ScreenFlow in Slack.
Mark, first of all, that was like a fine piece of wizardry. I appreciate it. It was pretty good. My question for you is is there a maximum number of channels that you could put on there?
Ooh, that is a question I do not know the answer to.
Okay.
In the solution I've built,
Yes.
that would be no, but they will depend on Slack's limits. Let's just see how many Slack channels can you have to see if there's a limit. According to Slack, there is no limit.
Oh, wow.
Unique channel names. What you might have seen in there is the Slack channel name was built via formula in my solution. That approach would have to be reviewed in a sense. However, what you could do in a sense. And it's the bit I don't have in my solution, which I probably will do as I'm building that out, is to have it so that you can't have duplicate name values in the record. So you can, in your setup inside of Salesforce, what you can do is you can say, the name has to be unique. So, and that's just a tick box you can set in the object settings. So that's something that I might do if I was doing it, as I build the solution out further.
Thank you. It just seems like if there was like an infinite number of Slack channels, there would need to be a way to categorize them.
Yeah.
And to make them, just basically organize them a bit better.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, so this is stuff that we'll put you'll find if you, well, not to give spoilers here for what we're going to go to in just a little bit, but when you look at kind of some of the best practices around Slack, which is stuff you can look at when you're doing going through some of the resources around preparing for the admin exam, it goes through best practice around like naming conventions for your Slack channel. So for example, if it's a project channel, they recommend you starting with the prefix PRJ for project. If it's event, EV, and those kind of things. So having a naming convention can really help in that regard. But as you saw with that solution, that's semi-automated with it being a formula. So you can make it quite easy with that as well.
So I'll jump in here because, again, we're kind of spoilering some of the stuff to come. But one of the huge caveats of the use of Slack right now is that there's big differences between what you get as the free version and what you get as the like basic paid version, and then what you get as the enterprise version, as with anything that's subscription based these days. But so within the basic paid version, there is the opportunity to rearrange and create sort of like groupings of channels so that you can better keep track of them within the interface. And then there are like many other things that you can unlock as a result of upgrading to a paid plan. So like we spoke earlier about the ability to unlock Slack Connect, which is what allows you to connect to people in external organizations who they have the ability to join one channel within your organization, and that's part of the paid plan. So you can give them access to a channel even though they're a part of like an external organization. And then in the enterprise level plans, you even have the opportunity to build multiple workspaces. So you don't have to contain everything within a single workspace. You can have multiple workspaces. But again, you can't test any of that functionality without paying for a paid plan. And equally, you can't, there's no like Slack dev orgs available at the minute. So like Chris, I know you were asking about what capabilities were brought about, because Slack has its own screen flows actually that you can launch within Slack through the workflow builder tool that's native to the Slack profile, the Slack platform, but you can't play with it unless you have the paid version. So we couldn't demo those today.
That is something a lot of us in the community are campaigning to have. So like either have admins get like a free workspace or something like that, so that we actually do things like experimental workflow builder.
It's a very, very little known fact, but you can actually get enterprise grid sandboxes for free. I've got 2. The form to get it's hidden. I can't remember for the life of us where it is, but somebody showed us it once, and basically all you do is you just go online, fill out the form, and then support provision one for you and give you the credentials. But it is possible to get a enterprise grid sandbox.
Okay, well, while you're Googling away while the rest of us are talking and you happen to come across that page, Chris, like definitely share that with everyone in the chat as a resource, because I know, like that would be incredibly valuable just even as a tool to learn in. Because like you say, none of it's available. Like a lot of the functionality is locked unless you have a paid version.
Well, I think I've got the link for it. Well, there we go. Chris has already beat me to it. I think that's the same one.
All right.
So
So
I think we're
okay, consider that resource number one. Everybody go and get yourself a paid workspace.
So what I'll do is I'll save this and I'll put the link that we share tonight. Share from this. I'll save the chat and we'll share the links into our Slack workspace, which we'll be telling you a little bit about later on.
Perfect.
So now it's over to you, Kristen, for the last slot.
All right, and this is super timely, so thank Chris for contributing. Basically, now we're just going to go through and talk a little bit about what are some resources that you can use to learn more about Slack. So the first resource that we have is and I'll bring my screen up to share. I'll just go ahead and share my desktop. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So the first thing is that we've set up a little bit of a trail mix for you guys with all of the available Slack badges on Trailhead. So this is the Salesforce resource for learning more about Slack, and you can earn the badges in Trailhead through the modules. But if you're just learning about getting started with Slack, I know Susanna, something that might be interesting for you to take a look at would be the Slack etiquette module that talks a little bit about the importance of creating open channels, for public consumption, and how the use of that can help increase transparency in your organization. Share, something you touched on was the ability to work asynchronously with Slack. So, setting your working hours and setting your away notifications so that people know when you're working. Another cool feature of the paid version of Slack is that you can add huddles. So if you just need to have a quick conversation with somebody, you can see that they're available within channel, and then you can call the huddle just to cover a topic quickly. You also have the ability to do a quick screen capture in the paid plans, and the asynchronous work badge talks a little bit about it, as does the Slack badge, which we'll talk about in a bit. So we've put together all of the available trails, which again contain all of the available badges on Trailhead. And Mark put that in the chat, I think, for you guys. And also, obviously, we'll share that within our own workspace in just a minute. So feel free to check that out. We also want to invite you to join our Salesforce Northeast user group Slack workspace. So we will pop that link in the chat as well. And this is a group that will be for us to collaborate within the Northeast, but also obviously, if you're a little bit further flung, feel free to join as well. So you can see some of the channels that we put together, as well as just general resources. So join us there. The next piece is that there is an open workspace that's part of the more general Salesforce Ohana. I don't have it on my personal workspace because it's linked to my work email and my work computer, but we will send the link in the chat to join. I highly recommend it, as it's been I only just joined it this last week, but it's been a really good resource just for connecting with people, and people seem to want to share it within that Slack community just as much as they do on Trailhead Answers. So if you have something that you have a question to and want it answered quite quickly, it seems like a really valuable resource. So definitely join that. We've also got the ability to learn Slack skills on Slack Certified. So Slack Certified is your go-to for Slack's own version of Trailhead, let's say. So you can earn badges based on, again, specific topics. So I've done the Slack basics, as well as again, Susanna, maybe you want to check out the etiquette and productivity. And then a lot of these are affiliated with, again, the paid version. So I haven't completed them to this point, but those would be Workflow Builder. You can get access to better analytics, You can also, again, work with external organizations using Slack Connect. And then there are some sort of more developer-based, creating apps and then connecting them, resources available in the badges. So those you can earn for free, and those are just, again, a free learning resource. And then if you want to go on and get certified, again, slackcertified.com is the resource to do that. So there's you can purchase the bundle pack of the admin prep as well as the exam, or you can purchase them individually. But obviously you would hope that if you were going through all the badges, that you would have hopefully enough information to move forward with that. And then if you were interested in honing your dev skills on the Slack platform, this would be the place to do it as well. And then finally, there are Slack community groups that you can join at slackcommunity.com. So we've come through a couple of the ones in our region, and the most active one near us is actually in Birmingham. And they have a pretty active group. So their most recent meetup was in June. I believe they did a panel discussion. So feel free to join them. And then the London group is also fairly active, as you might imagine, and has a lot more users than most of the other groups in EMEA. So feel free to browse the community websites and join anything that looks of interest to you. So those are all the resources that we have to share with you today. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And then to Chris, hats off to you, mate. Thank you for sharing where you can get a paid version to play in. That's going to be like incredibly useful, and I have a feeling that's going to be a black hole in my weekend. So thanks, but also, yeah, no thanks.
I actually learned that on the certified developer course that you just highlighted there. It's one of the things to cover.
Oh, wow. Okay. So good to know. All right. So have you been Slack certified then, Chris?
I am, yeah.
In both admin and development?
No, just the developer. We're actually building a Slack app. That I can't really go into too much detail about.
I was just gonna say, like, some more, and I could tell you were like, this stuff.
Yeah, maybe in a few months. But yeah, I took the certified developer course, and I'd built a few Slack apps before, so it covered a lot of ground that I already knew, but I also learned quite a lot of stuff on it, including that thing about the enterprise grid sandboxes.
Yeah.
And if anyone's interested in taking those courses, if you join the Slack communities that Mark linked to, there's quite often discount codes go in there for the preparation material, so you can get it for free, which is what we did when we took the courses.
Yeah.
It's a shame Peter John's not with us, otherwise he might have been able to get a free certification.
And just on a site, picking up on what you're saying there, Chris, as well. I don't know where necessarily everybody works, but if anybody was saying working with a partner, you can get discounts for. I'm assuming you can get it for the developer one as well, but certainly for admin, if you're working for a partner, there are discount codes available to help you get the study materials for. It's either cheap or free. And the same thing with the actual exam ones as well. There are discount codes available for partners as well, if you happen to be working for a partner.
Is that true for when you say partner, you mean IS?
So it'd be even like an app exchange partner or consultant partner. So either ISV or an SI.
Yeah. See, we tried to get those courses because we're a partner, and they wouldn't give us any Slack ones, but I think that might have been a mistake on their behalf, to be honest.
Yeah.
But we just ended up getting the discount codes from the Slack community anyway, and just got it for free.
Yeah. Cool. So that was basically the main stuff that we had. So we're gonna begin to wrap up It looks like we'll be finishing ever so slightly early, but we will. But I'm more than happy to keep the Zoom open if anybody does want to stick around and chat afterwards. But let me share my screen. And Kristen, are you right to share the links from Slack as we go through? So I'm just gonna share the closing announcements that we have. We do have a Slido poll coming up, and the reason for this is because we've got at the moment we think we're going to have 3 events with presentations left this year. We are working on a Christmas event, which will probably be more of a social one, but we're hoping we'll announce things again in the Slack workspace once we have more information on that. But for the poll, if you hop onto slido.com and use the join code of 3628553, what we really want to ask is what topics would you like to see us cover between now and particularly the end of the year. Just to note as well, we do have some topics that we got collected on a Jamboard earlier this year. We also have some topics that we could also pick back up on that we asked for last year. So what the idea is that, granted there's only 3 sessions between now and the end of the year, probably in terms of presentation stuff. Any ideas that people have, we'll keep a note of this, and we can come back to these things at future dates as well. Because what we want to try and do is do actually sessions that you want, rather than what we want.
Yeah, so what happens is that like a week from now, Mark and I are going to get on a Zoom together and we're going to go, what should we talk about at our next meeting? And then we'll pull up the Jamboard, and then inevitably we've done several topics from the Jamboard, and we kind of discuss, like, do we think that they're still relevant? Do people still want to hear about these things? So as like an example, so Tableau came up on the Jamboard twice. And so it would be a good topic, I think, for us to visit as a group, except that we did do a Tableau based meeting. I guess it was about 1.5 years ago. Is that right now, Mark? It was greater than 1 year ago.
Yeah, we've done a proper big session about 2 years ago. We also did a smaller Tableau related session, which was mainly really around like Einstein next best action, which is sort of linked to Tableau, and we did that last year.
Yeah, so I guess what we're hoping for is that if people could just contribute, an idea or so about, and feel free to put it in the Slido, put it in the chat, just take yourself off mute and share with us. But again, when Mark and I sit together in the Zoom meeting and go like, what should we talk about next month? We want to make it as useful for everyone as possible. So we want, the more actively you guys can participate and share with us like what you're interested in hearing about and learning about, the better we can make it for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. And what we'll say as well is, for those who are in the Slack workspace as well, feel free to post stuff in there as well. If there's something I see you come across, or you kind of want you come up with something and you just go, hey, look, I've got this at work and we have this as a topic in a future session, post it in the Slack workspace, and we'll have a look at that. Okay, so we've got some ones coming in now which are good ones as well. We'll give that another second or so, and to allow the last person who's typing in there. So we've got someone typing in there, and yeah, so we've got some good ideas for that. So what we'll do, we'll leave it at that for now, and we'll basically, if you have any other ones that aren't on that list, I'll share the image from this actually as well. So let me just see if I can quickly screen grab this. There we go, and I'll share this in the Slack after this. But again, any extra ideas, feel free to share them in the Slack workspace. And so let's move on. So the next one I kind of want to highlight is Dreamforce. So it's coming up in about a month or so's time. If you're going in person, it'll be really great to see you there. If you're going in person, going, and I'm actually speaking at it this year. Was completely caught off guard with that. I wasn't expecting to be speaking at it, but I'm a speaker this year along with a lot of other great people in the community. And however, the in-person tickets have now apparently sold out. So if you were aiming to go and were looking to register, you might have to stick with it on Salesforce Plus. But my understanding is a lot of this stuff is going to be streamed this year. I'm not sure exactly what the schedule for that's going to be, how that's going to work out, but we'll see how that goes. But it is going to be available to stream on Salesforce Plus as well. Next up, an event that's happening in London coming up, which is DevOps Dreamin. If you were here last month, you know we had Rob Cowell speak, who works for GearSet as a DevOps advocate. And this year there's having the DevOps Dreamin conference happening in London over at King's Place Concert Hall. And it looks like it's going to be a really good event. And if you happen to go and you're in the area the night before, there's a little side note. The Women in Tech group, I think it's the night before, the Women in Tech group are actually hosting Stephanie Herrera, who's well known for Salesforce Saturdays, starting that off. She's going to be speaking at the Women in Tech group in London, and I'm pretty sure that's the day before DevOps Dreamin.
I'm speaking at that actually, DevOps Dreamin.
Cool.
About chat ops. So basically DevOps inside Slack.
Nice. That'll be a really interesting topic.
There's a plug if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually got an email from them the other day asking us to try and plug it a little bit, so that's my duty fulfilled.
Check that box, Chris.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and feel free to share that in the workspace as well, Chris, and we'll more than happily share it out as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's DevOps Dreamin. Next up, we're going to be launching fairly soon the tickets for this event. This is an event that I'm co-launching along with Vicky Morris Henry, and it is going to be most likely it's going to be a one-day conference, but all the sessions are going to be focused around process automation. But we are doing it around both sides of the spectrum. So we're not doing it just on the declarative side. We are going to be having some code-based sessions as well, for looking around Apex and those kind of and that kind of side of it as well. But the sessions are going to be all around process automation. So it's probably going to be quite a few on floor, and we'll have some as well around the coded side as well. And that's going to be in November, and we will be announcing the date and opening up for tickets for that very soon. We are just finalizing a couple of things before we launch that in that form. So that's Automation Dreamin. Next up, a little subtle plug for myself as well. I am starting and I don't know why the form's on there, links on there. This is an old graphic. Should have checked that before I shared this one. But registrations for my set of sessions on Floor are available, and I've recently upped the ticket space as well, and due to high demand for this. So this set of sessions is going to be a 10-week series, and we're going to be essentially building floors by taking it from the perspective of a use case. So there's going to be not so much around kind of like the things you would often hear in some of these the beginner classes, because they are needed, but such as like how what's a variable, those kind of things. I'm not going to be diving too much into them, before you will get a little bit. It's going to be mainly around here's a use case. Let's build this, so map this out and build this out in Flow. So that's starting in September. It'll be starting on the Tuesday after Dreamforce, which I believe the date for that will be the 25th or the 26th. Although I might have the dates wrong. Either way, the dates are all on the Eventbrite page, and those dates are correct on the Eventbrite page for that. last one we've got as well. This is just hot off the press tonight. For anybody who is interested in speaking at events, French Touch Dreamer has just opened up their call for speakers. It is open up until beginning of October. I think the date was October 2nd for that. But the link that we should be posting in the chat is a link to their the tweet for that about the call for speakers. So if you're interested in speaking at a conference, French Touch Dream, which is happening in Paris on the 1st of December, now have their call for speakers open. And with that brings us to the end of this session officially. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for coming. And we will be doing an event in September. We'll let people know what the conference will be for that. That's going to be virtual. We're looking at doing an October one in person, but we will be doing one in September virtually. So again, just want to say a big thank you to everybody. I'm going to stop recording the session now, and if you just want to, feel free to stick around. We can keep the Zoom open for a bit longer.